So, hello everyone. My name is Lucille, and I'm part of the marketing team at Ezomar. And I'm excited to welcome you all to this special community circle organized to celebrate Data Privacy Day. So, today we have two amazing hosts, Claudio and Barry. And before we dive in, I will go over some housekeeping rules to ensure a smooth and productive session. So, first, we encourage active participation. So, please feel free to share your thoughts and questions in the chat. I think Barry will also put some question in there. And there is also a raise your hand button. So, if you'd like to speak directly or share a comment, please use that feature. And during the discussion, if you're not actively participating, we kindly ask you to mute yourself. And now it's time for me to give the mic to our host.
Hi, I'm Barry Jennings. Glad to be participating in this conversation today. This whole series has been sort of between goes from the sublime to the ridiculous. It's actually kind of fun. And I'm really eager to get your perspectives on data privacy and AI. And my co-host, Claudio, I'll let you introduce yourself and then we'll just get kicked off.
Hey everyone, so I'm Claudio Gennaro. I work for Ezomar since almost 3 years now. I work here as legal and public affairs manager, and would like to give a huge thank you to Lucille and the marketing team for making me happy and dedicating this community circle to International Privacy Day. That's something that we do every year, not only in the form of a community circle, but we always dedicate some time, webinar interviews to celebrate this day, which is usually celebrated on the 28th of January. But this year it fell on a weekend, so we decided to have a community circle today instead. So thanks a lot, Lucille. Thanks a lot for all of you for joining.
Yeah, and I'll like I said, I'll introduce myself a bit deeper. I work at Microsoft, and I cover our cloud products on the commercial side, and so not a minute goes by where I don't have to think about data security, privacy, and all that fun stuff. Since we hold a lot of data. I put my first question in there because I'm super curious because someone, I think that's Ray, just put the answer that I almost always put. But on a scale of 1 to 10, what's the importance of data privacy as a researcher? Because I think it's super important to me when I have to do an annual training and then I have to certify that I took the training, and it's kind of big and scary. And then I do my job. And unless somebody on my team has a problem, well, you know, I know what to do. I know what to ask for, but it sort of fades to the back until lately. And I put a question in here because I'm super curious, like, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's the importance of data privacy as a researcher? And I think my second question, which I will drop in there now, adds a bit of a wrinkle. For some. And that question is, what's that rating when you think about it in relation to how you will be engaging with AI, since this is an AI task force thing? And my first question on the you know, what's the importance of data privacy in general? Can somebody just tell me why? Your first answer is, you know, why are these numbers 9 and 10? And then I really want to say, really? But can somebody please chime in and tell me what is the overall importance to data privacy as a researcher? I want it on the record. Don't be shy.
Well, if nobody goes, I will maybe try and break the ice. So what we often say is that privacy and data protection are an essential part of research because it really allows to demonstrate to the public that that their views, their opinion, anything that pertains to their personal life, anything that pertains to their personal sphere is protected by the researcher. It's not only used to extract, research is not only meant to extract the personal opinion for profit, but in the process those data, those sensitive data and whatnot, they are protected from any external infiltration. And without this trust from the public, research will be severely damaged in the process.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that's, sorry if I cut you off, Ray, go ahead.
So I'm going to be provocative. Most people, most of the time, don't care about privacy. If you were to go to a market research function and ask people if they cared about privacy, they would all say yes, yes, yes. And then you say, you've got a chance of winning this $100 bottle of champagne. Just put your business card in here and on the back, put your birthday. Do you know what? Half the room would do it because the value is the probability of winning. Let's say there's 100 of you. I can now work it out as a statistician. You valued your privacy at $1. Until something goes wrong, most people hand over a lot of information. I was in a restaurant 2 days ago and I was the guest. And as we were being checked in, she said, oh, can I take some details? Can I have your telephone number? Can I have your email? And the person who was going to be paying the bill gave them all without even asking why or what are you going to do with them? Who is going to have them? So the reason we need laws is because most people don't care most of the time. And that the reason we need standards is that because most people don't actually care most of the time. So we have to do it right, even when it doesn't feel like there's any pressure to do it right.
I totally agree. I mean, we are a data handler and a data steward. And so we are obligated to protect data at all times. There's a lot of stuff in data. There's a lot of stuff out there in the world on Ray Pointer. I can tell you as a fact right now. I don't know what it is, thankfully, but I promise you, if he uses email, if he uses apps, if he goes on the internet, there's a trail. And smart people can piece things together with that trail. And it really matters how that gets stewarded, how it gets protected, how you understand can learn what's actually going on and how that works. It is super critical. It is, yeah. I have to take safety training videos and to this day, the number of people who put a password on a Post-it note on their laptop, it's still high. And, the number of people whose password is password 123 is, probably still high. And so the notion of privacy is, I think Ray is definitely spot on. It's like many things. It's like car insurance. You really hate it until the moment that you need it.
I just want to second what Ray said. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, a similar perspective, and from here in Kenya, which is a world leader when it comes to mobile money, the transaction over the mobile phone. I think they are the best when it comes to almost 90% of the people, 90% of the population uses that more than that, perhaps. And then when you send a transaction of money or send money to someone, the other person sees your phone number, obviously, right? And sees the amount and who are your name and everything. And I keep asking the same question, where is data privacy about? Where is that? Because when you take a cab, you are going to pay through that mobile money. You buy a vegetable, you are going to pay almost everything over here. So I think this is the notion where we actually, ever since the data privacy thing has come up, we all become more, quote unquote, become conscious, or I would say more on the record what we are doing about it. But in generally, people are not careful about that. If you go to anybody's LinkedIn profile, you can just grab a photo or whatever other information is available. Who is taking care of that? Who is being accountable for that? So I think that is where, as a responsible sort of business industry, it becomes even more important to take care of these things to ensure our respondents' details remain confidential.
Anybody else? I see some people unmuted. Feel free to talk, share. I guess the other thing, as we think about this in the context of AI, I think this puts it on steroids. I mean, you said people can go on and see your LinkedIn and all this other stuff. They can also take that picture and do all sorts of really cool things with it. They can do things at scale. They can connect it to other pieces of data. There's lots of possibilities for a bad actor to go and do things. And I think the more problematic things are the simple things that don't get done, or the unthought of things that we do, putting your phone number on the back of a business card in a raffle with your birthday. I'm going to have to use that again and again, right? Because it does put you can't assess the value of your personal privacy that way. What are people's concerns when we do think about AI? I mean, we do research with human beings. There's a variety of sample sources out there. The data gets collected. Sure, we may not ask a lot of personal questions all the time, but we get some things, and people can figure things out. As we think about AI, there's just more power in the system. What are we concerned about when we start thinking about adding AI to the mix? Well, I feel like we should get up and have a dance party, get some energy going. I knew this would be tough. I didn't think it would be that tough. All right, Claudio.
But Claudio, you shared one in the session about 12 hours ago. Do you want to kick off the one you shared now?
I was about to say that one of the issues that we discussed this morning or night for many of you was about the issue of consent. It looks, the example that I shared is we are recording right now the call, and you all consented implicitly or explicitly for your video to be recorded. However, new development in AI will maybe allow us in the near future to extract more information than you may be consenting us to collect. Face recognition, emotion recognition. So the issue of consent, in my opinion, will become central for researchers in the near future. And that's something that we will tackle. We will definitely tackle soon. I'm wondering, is there any other example to that? Is there any other technology that has the potential to extract information from data subjects without even their knowledge or their explicit consent?
I'm going to dive. Sorry, I'm going to be quiet because somebody else spoke.
No, this was me. I mean, you raised an interesting point, Claudio. If you are recording this piece of work, you in theory can create a transcript. Everybody in here, when they hit accept or logged in, I bet you nobody read the little click the button to talk to see what's going to happen or what happens to your data. But there are 2, 4, 6, 7, at least 7 faces on my screen who chose to opt into this call, and they are recorded. I can attribute everything they say to their name. Claudia, if this might be a very good creative genius, he can connect those data to these names from LinkedIn to Facebook to a whole lot of other things and really get to know Ray Pointer a whole lot better. It's going to take some effort and some work. But my guess is everybody on here, we want to join the meeting, so we click the button.
So the new AI legislation coming through Europe has got very specific things about biometrics, facial recognition, emotional recognition. So just to build on Claudio's example there, maybe we get the AI to look at everyone's face and say who is actually agreeing, who is paying attention, who is actually doing their emails while they're part of this discussion. Smart AI can probably do that sort of processing. So what consent, and this is something that's actually worried me for many years about things like neuroscience. And this is the Harvard project, which you can do that to find out whether you're racist, sexist, homophobic, and so on. You might go into there giving consent because you don't think you are racist. And you find out the same time as the machine finds out. Did you consent to the machine knowing this if you did not know it was going to be revealed? Now with AI, put that on steroids, and it can find out potentially all sorts of things about you. And I'm going to now add one which occurred to me. Some of you will have heard of cold reading. It's what people who claim to be able to tell all about you and tell your future do. They ask you some clever questions and you reveal more. And then the way you answer those questions reveal more. It's certainly going to be possible, I would think, in the near future to program AI to conduct those cold probing questions where they tease out of you a lot more than you had intended to give. So you consented to the interview, but you didn't consent to the additional things that are going to be found out from the cold reading by the AI.
Right. And to extend that a bit, I mean, I'm going to pick on you, Lucille. Because I can see her image, I can, an AI, a good one, potentially, could say, well, during this conversation, she's actually been shopping for shoes. When I look at the image of her screen in her glasses, I know that she is shopping for a mall in her town. And then she is going to put an appointment with one of her girlfriends to go shopping at 6 p.m. For shoes. It'd be a great time the next time she opens up her thing to give her a shoe sale ad at the mall that she's going to based off of that. And none of that stuff was, I'm sure she did not expect any of that to be pulled together and be a part of her world. And as a researcher, I mean, again, that is interesting data. If I'm a shoe manufacturer, if I'm a retailer, there's some interesting power in that data. But is that the right way to get it, right? And I can understand where you're coming from. There's lots of potential unintended benefits that as researchers, as knowledge workers, we can learn more and more and more. Where are the lines? And again, how do we make sure that people know what are the possibilities with every digital interaction?
So I posted in the chat one article that I read a couple of years ago about, it's from Stanford Business Magazine. It titles, "Deep Neural Network are more accurate than humans at detecting sexual orientation from facial images." A few years ago, this didn't seem possible. It seemed really like sci-fi. Today, I will give that for granted. So again, when you accepted this call being recorded, is it something you were agreeing and sharing? Were you opting in for an AI potentially detecting your sexual orientation from facial images? I wouldn't. And this tells a lot about the possibilities for qualitative research, for sure, in the next years. But also tells us a lot what the growing responsibilities will be for the researcher individually.
So I want to bring a perspective here. One is when either you're, obtaining consent from your respondents and in all good faith. That's how market research industry has been for years. Like you ask the question, you introduce, and you say, ratio of the respondent, the all information is gonna be confidential, right? And you go ahead with your survey. But I think today's time, the cybersecurity is bringing another sort of a challenge or risk and biggest threat. While you are good at your intention in terms of like you are going to make sure that data remain confidential. What if as a market research agency, as a business, you could not secure that information is told? That will become who is going to be accountable for that one. And I think that's where the data protection, the whole framework of data protection comes, where an organization has to put a number of things into place to ensure that it remain even protected at that level as well. So I don't know any views on that side, cybersecurity side.
Yeah, it's something I worry about a little bit, well, and a lot actually, all at the same time, because I will work with an agency. They're going to give me really great data, and I'm going to love it. But if it has something that I don't know, how it's collected, if there is a breach, if there is exposure, if there's a less diligence from a privacy perspective. I mean, GDPR says that there's a price to be paid, and you have a great company, without a doubt. But that report is in my email, and chances are they're going to sue us, not you. Why would you not go after the bigger fish, right? And so we absolutely think about this all the time. And yeah, don't get me wrong. That's why we are hyper diligent. We build tools for all this stuff. We think about it all the time. You have to sign the piece of paper that you've been adequately trained on, GDPR and everything else, depending upon where you live, which is a whole different problem because, well, the EU, the UK, the USA, and it's never all the same. But it's a big thing. We have to have trust. And I think you talked on this earlier, Claudia. At the end of the day, I honestly believe we enter into a trust agreement with every respondent that we talk to. And we have an obligation to respect that interaction. We get the benefit of learning about their habits and practices and opinions and all that other stuff. Maybe there's an incentive, maybe there's not, but at the end of the day, there's a tacit and an explicit expectation that, there's privacy involved. And I think that once broached, becomes very problematic. Ben.
Yeah, hi everyone. Ben here. Yeah, great to be here. I was just going back to, I love your point there, Barry, but almost just before what Claudia was saying about, the consent to the interview, but not consenting to the other things done by the AI, that it might be analysing facial expressions or emotional recognition. I suppose just and I can see where that's coming from, and I kind of worry about that as well. But almost a challenge to that is, human research, whatever we want to call it now, a human doing the analysis, but like we used to do and still do. We're doing that, aren't we? We're kind of analysing not just transcripts, but we're analysing facial expressions, body language, interactions between people. So what's the difference, I suppose, between getting consent? We don't ask for explicit consent to be able to analyze that interview in lots of different ways, whereas why would it make a difference necessarily to get an AI to do that for us, as long as the data is being stored in a sensible way that isn't going anywhere, that's only for research purposes. Just an interesting, I don't know, just occurred to me then as something whether, sometimes I suppose if the AI is secure and reasonable, that is it not reasonable then to use it, for analytical purposes without having to go through lots of other protection kind of permissions as well? Don't know if anyone thinks about that.
I bet. I think this is a really good point. One of the things that's going to crop up is things we've done for years we need to reevaluate. So there was a paper at the MRS by, I think it was Drusilla Gabot, about 30 years ago. And she went and visited people who had attended focus groups or depth interviews in the UK and asked them to talk about their experience, and came across several people who were traumatized because they had revealed things in those group discussions or in the depth interviews that they had not known about themselves. One, that they had actually contributed to their child's obesity when it was probed through. Another one, that they had treated their sister like really badly, because the interviewers were using these good probing techniques, thinking about the Johari window. What is it that's hidden further in? They were identifying it, and this was causing distress when done well. And clearly, consent had not been gained to find out things that the person did not know about themselves. I think the change when we jump to the AI world is it could suddenly become very big. So it's a much bigger issue. And it makes us then look back and say, well, actually, maybe we should have not been doing that in the old days anyway, that we should only find out that which the consumer is willing to share. And we very often talk in inferred measurements, in quantitative, in probing techniques. How can we find out things that people don't want to share? Where's the consent?
And I don't know, it's a great point, Ray, and Ben. I think I love this struggle, this tension, because I've done on-site IDIs, for example. Long ago, I did some work about cooling servers inside of small businesses, and my questions were all about fans and openings and all sorts of stuff on this piece of machinery. And so we went, and the guy showed me his data center. And the thing I never would have known, we go in there and there's a window, and it has like 4 layers of foil on the window, blocking out the light and the heat, Texas sun, to keep the room cool. We never would have thought of that. We never would have said, this is a really big problem. That was a very unintended finding that we never would have learned were we not there, right? And I think we all have done pieces of work where the insight, sometimes we can ask the questions, but we're never going to ask the exact right question that may lead to the insight. That is inferred sometimes it's observed, sometimes it leads to that question, that probe in qualitative, where you say, so tell me about why you put the foil on the window as opposed to, buying something that has a faster fan, or why don't you turn up the air conditioning, right? And that led to deeper insight. And I don't know what that answer is. You're right, Ray. I think you will have the potential to get more observational and other data in the mix, and it will be easier to go through that stuff and surface up findings. But I don't know where the boundary is. I would be curious about someone else, because it could be, right, like I said, if I was looking at Lucille's glasses and getting something very personal to her, that feels kind of creepy.
Yeah.
Right.
So
if I did 1,000 of these and we noticed that everybody had the same book behind them, I don't know what I'd do with that.
So just to give you another example of something I've done recently, which is the way no, Scott, you've not spoken yet.
So I've been kind of ruminating as a lot of these different scenarios have you've been talking about, like, people revealing things they didn't even know about themselves, the benefits of going on site. I don't have an answer. I have a question. Let's say it's 5 years in the future, and the best moderator for every situation is an AI. It's fantastic. It gets at what, the researchers want God at. It's a master at dealing with every persona, every personality type that shows up on the phone to get them to open up, and talk about things. People consent-ish, it's kind of like when you go to a website, it's like, which flavor of cookies do you want? Do you want all the cookies? Do you want some of the cookies? Do you want none of the cookies? we all just say all the cookies, right? Because like none of us want to go through and like manage cookies for every scenario. And I think there's a body of research that says people will just give up a lot for convenience, right? To just kind of get through the process and get going. So I don't know if that's coming in 10 years or 2 years, but I think inevitably we're heading towards a world where the AI is either moderating the interview or it's potentially listening to the interview and prompting the moderator, or things like that. And it just knows so much about human beings and human nature that it's superhumanly good at it. And people consent, based on what little they know about the technology to participate. What does that look like? Does anybody not do that when it has such huge advantages? Does it become one of these, well, we have to do it because everybody else is doing it? What are people really consenting to? How informed can people be? So those are just some of the thoughts that are rattling around in my head.
Yeah, just to add there, Scott, if I may, I was just going to say that, yeah, how informed can people be? They might also get put off by, saying AI, and they might think, oh, that sounds scary. I don't know where my data's going, even if it is quite well regulated. We trust it very much to, do what we want it to do, not go any further. But it might, on the opposite side of things, people might just default, just always opt in, but it might create a barrier as well when actually we're not using it in such a nefarious way, but people might start to assume that, and it becomes a burden that we have to constantly having to tell people what we're using when actually we can't tell them enough about it for them to be able to then make an informed decision whether it's a good thing or not.
So here's somewhere where the legislators need to do their work properly, because you can't program a human to forget. Somebody reveals something to you, you're always going to remember that, and you'll bear that in mind. You can program an AI to forget. And that, I suspect, is going to be one of the things that legislation will require, as well as, there's going to be some really difficult times. I would expect the EU to go for nearly total transparency of the training data set, which is going to create enormous problems for anybody like OpenAI that has trawled a large part of the internet and are going to be fighting off copyright claims and royalty claims. But that would be one part of it. But I would expect the legislators to put in their facilities to remove memory of this, and to conduct an interview with nothing stored afterwards. So you conduct the interview, you draw the analysis, but you don't keep the data. That is also possible with future AI. I think, Scott, it's probably slightly further down the road, but once you have AI as a better interviewer than a human, you use AI. I don't think there is any two ways about that.
In your opinion, could anonymization, strong, sound, and safe anonymization techniques beyond what we currently have, be a remedy to that, to the opacity of consent?
Potentially. You'd have to have no rogue AIs, and I'm very much conflicted by the big rich companies, one of whom is on the line here, saying we mustn't have these free-for-all open source AI tools, because I think, I want access to these open source AI tools. On the other hand, if we want to put in strict regulation of they won't probe any deeper than this, they won't remember this, they must make this anonymous, it's harder to see that happening if we have a complete free-for-all with open source AI. And I'm writing stuff in my attic that nobody knows about.
Scott?
I'm a little less concerned with that, just because you know, at the end of the day, you got a research agency that has a reputation, right? So if it's, you know, a random robodial political poll, whatever, sure, they might do anything horrible. Joe Biden's getting his voice, you know, deep faked in, I forget what state it is right now, you know, calling voters. So those are the nefarious uses I worry about. I don't worry about it with anybody like us, because we're going to pick tools that make all kinds of assurances to us so that we can make those assurances to our clients and to the participants and things like that. So I think, you know, I don't worry about it with anybody who is taking the time to be on a call like this, but there is a kind of a universe out there beyond that. And then it's honestly the least of my worries, because the horrible stuff is going to be so much more horrible than that, that I don't know that that'll rank quite as high on the list.
And
I
it's a
think
fair.
there is a,
Go ahead.
sorry, on Scott's point, I think there is an implication on research, even though it is like, as you said, we are all reputed marketed research agencies. We're going to take care of all sort of measures and compliance and all good. But what if, in general, outside market research, if things are going like deep fakes and it's becoming like, you know, unbearable and people are getting worried, general people, like, you know, general human with nothing to do with all those things, they get scared, right? They get scared. And then when you go and approach for a survey and you say, you know what, I would like to take your opinion, and say, no, sorry, I'm not going to give you. So I think somewhere it has got implication on all sort of industry, especially all this knowledge-driven industry where we draw insights from people, isn't it?
Yeah. And it takes me back to Ray's point in the beginning. Hey, you want a coupon? Do a survey. Still effective. I talk to technical audience people, and the incentives are large. The fraud is ridiculous. But the economist in me says that's a supply and demand issue, right? At the end of the day, there's a right the benefit of even taking the chance of doing the fraud. There's a potential return there, and so you know, we rely on the openness of human beings to share. And we made an industry off of that, and we thrive off of that. And so I don't know what that answer is going to be. I think the other thing that's also interesting, which we haven't talked about, at some point, I'm going to pick on you, Scott. Scott's going to give me something. It's going to be fantastic and wonderful. And it's going to be like 5 conversations with human beings and synthetic conversations with like 50 other human beings. And he'll be able to tell me that this happens around the world. Where does that come from? What does that mean? Was that based off of, how was that based off? What's the root of that data? Right? I don't know. Maybe he bought a database of, I don't know, some hacker hacked a hospital, and so he has all this wealth of medical information on people, you know, over 50. Right? That could be pretty powerful in the right hands, and the wrong hands. And so I think I wonder about kind of how things might evolve when data from humans is mixed up with AI, and then you know you've got this synthetic approach, which I think will be a thing at some point. Is there a risk there? Anybody have thoughts on that?
We only work with the most ethical hackers, Barry.
I knew that. That's why I take your calls every once in a while. You know.
Well, I'm going to start with a positive first. Synthetic data could be a method of protecting anonymity. So we interview real people, and then we create synthetic people, and to give you a very simple example, we interview some people, they give us some great interviews. So we then feed that into the AI and say, write a script, just like they do for Hollywood. And then we say, okay, now cast this script and produce the video. So we've produced something which is fantastic storytelling. It's based on the data, it gets the right message across, but no real people have been viewed. Because one of the ongoing issues in our industry is we keep videoing people and our clients want to see the videos. And that is a bit of a tricky space, because who will see them and will they be used? And in B2B, it's a much bigger issue, because if you've done a video B2B interview, it's quite likely that the client will recognize the customer that's been interviewed. By switching over to synthetic data, we could actually, in that area, protect anonymity whilst keeping high quality messaging.
Interesting.
I like the idea of almost, the AI is kind of acting as a de-identification aggregation layer. To Barry's point, though, where does the data, come from, right? Does it come from the AI's ability to do fiction and kind of its, hallucination as a service capabilities? Does it come from the underlying data so verbatim that individuals are still identifiable because, it just kind of quoted them extremely accurately? But it is a very interesting idea. And it also leads to semi-crazy notions of things like research being continuous. So instead of going out and doing research, delivering a report, everybody ingests it, they keep what they could in their head, they try to remember it as they go off and do their jobs. There's just an AI they can talk to all the time that is always having new primary data shoved underneath it to keep it fresh and relevant and fill in sections where somebody asked a question and it didn't know the answer. And so that triggered a need to go do 5 or 10 interviews in a space. With the right prompting or the right technology, can the AI follow a, kind of constitution that keeps it from revealing, too much detail about somebody to where they're easily identifiable, and also just says, I don't know, if you ask a question it doesn't know and doesn't make it up? Yeah, I think all those things are shockingly close to completely possible today.
And I think it goes back to your where we opened this parts of this conversation. You're right, Scott. You got to keep feeding the beast with data. I care about today's problems. I don't care as much about 2022's problems. And so that means that there needs to be steady ingestion, for example. And for example, if I need to do research, if I'm doing research on what's the prototypical market researcher, well, Scott and I both wearing blue shirts, and we both have travel books in the bookshelves behind us. So the prototypical market researcher likes blue and loves to travel, right? I didn't tell that, right? But again, and again, that's a ridiculous thing. But you do that 1,000 times in a year, it's a finding. And I don't know. I've used less data to make bigger findings in my life, I have to say. But to be honest, but again, I didn't say you have access to everything that you can observe. You see a picture of my dog and all that other stuff. What do you do with that? And I don't know. I think that's the. Ben's point kind of keeps coming back to me over and over again. That's some interesting insight. That's the thing that I would never be able to think about as a marketer who I have to serve. And maybe we should do a joint venture with Travelocity Books, right? And that's how we're going to get the prototypical market researcher. And you never would have thought about that unless you had that situation.
So I'm just going to circle back to Claudio and Privacy Day. And one of the sort of key driving things for those of us in Europe is GDPR. It's had some influence on the rest of the world too. And one of the key principles in there is you can't collect data that is incidental to your purposes, and you can't store data for a long period of time because it might be useful in the future. And a lot of the things we're talking about here that AI could do would actually break those tenets in GDPR. And so that again might be somewhere where we see the role of the legislators. And I've been in this industry into the 70s, and most of the time we have tried to keep the legislators out of the insights ecosystem because we can self-regulate better. I think we're now in the situation where we desperately want the legislators to regulate AI and its link to privacy. I think that we can't do that with self-regulation because there's just so much stuff that can happen. And I think for the first time, really, we need to be lobbying the European Parliament, Congress, when it gets its act together, whatever, to come up with some legislation that is actually going to protect everybody.
Indeed, the minimization principle, that's one of the main principles in GDPR. So do not hold data for us forever, just waiting for a purpose, but delete it when they're not useful anymore. This is just one of the principles that, in my opinion, is intertwines very well with AI. Data protection by default, privacy by design. Those are all principles that, in my opinion, merge very well with AI. And in the end, we must not forget that when it comes to personal data that fuel AI system, they remain personal data. GDPR remains applicable, and GDPR still is the lighthouse for data protection worldwide. We have many other legislations, of course, very solid legislations, but in general, compliance with GDPR ensures a high degree of compliance worldwide. That's something we must not forget. Personal data, however they are used, whether it's AI, whether our simpler software, it's just an Excel sheet, they remain personal data and they should be treated as such.
Yeah,
Talking about synthetic data, Ray, you had a really interesting point in the previous session, which sent me into some kind of a rabbit hole for the hours to come, about watermarking synthetic data. Could you maybe spend a couple of words about it?
Yeah, so this is something that emerged in the conversation earlier today. We want to know whether we're dealing with synthetic data. How can we do that? And it occurred to me that one way is we could say it should always be watermarked. So if we take videos, you've got to put those pixels in there saying created by X on Y or whatever. It comes back to a point that Nell Watson made at the AI forum we had in Amsterdam, that evidently more than 50% of all the images on the internet at the moment are created. So computers are learning from created images more than they're learning from real images. If everything that was created had a watermark, we would know that. If every video, if you as a client were given a recording, you would know if this was a recording of a real person because there's no watermark, or it's been constructed watermark. If we talk about quantitative data, it could be simply adding a new column to the data that says, is this data as it was collected, or is this data modified? Maybe we could go almost down the semantic web route and say you have to put into that file what the modification was to that data. So have we trimmed off some of the outlying values in that data, or is it purely synthetic? Has it been created by hierarchical Bayes? Any of these questions could simply be flagged in the data set so that you would always, if you wanted to, or if your machine wanted to, you could tell you were taking as input something that was modeled, constructed, synthetic, whichever way you want to word it. And we could probably do that with standards as opposed to asking for legislation. If we were simply to say all data that is not as it was first captured should be flagged.
Yeah. And I like that notion too. I think the bigger players that you alluded to earlier, they're all on board with that, right?
Yeah.
Like today, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Baidu.
For Baidu, absolutely. From a visual and auditory perspective, watermarking is definitely a thing. And again, there's maybe a company here who has the latest and greatest AI-driven market research solution. Chances are they're going to host it on one of these bigger companies, and they would envelop and carry that responsibility. And Ray, there's probably some small company that's open sourcing and has a different perspective, because watermarking is not foolproof. You have to do work, and there's no incentive for the larger companies to likely do that. But there's bad actors will always be bad actors and do their thing. But I think you're right. I think the watermarking creates it goes back to the other thing, having a set of rules that are sensible, agreeable, and I don't want to say jointly negotiated, but where there's a high degree of interaction between the makers, the legislative bodies, et cetera, will likely land in a place that makes sense. Hopefully, at least 80% of the making sense goes across the world. That'll be a whole different thing. I'm sure, doing research with synthetic Germans might be very different than synthetic Americans. Who knows? But I think that's the journey. I agree. I think this is one of those rare cases where both industry and government are really trying to figure this out. And I'm curious to see how it lands, and then how it evolves a year later or 5 years later, because I think there's still going to be tons of innovation and unintended learnings and mistakes and opportunities. Any last minute thoughts from anybody? We only have like 5 minutes left.
I'm just wondering about the sorry, Barry. Given synthetic data is so sort of topical here right now, and we all are talking all the time. I'm just wondering about a scenario where synthetic data is also pretty much available in the form of app. Somebody will do their mastery on the prompt engineering, how to generate the best synthetic data, which is close to your target audience, which is available as a marketplace, right? That's one. Secondly, you have the other side where you have the tools available for analyzing, extracting insight and all that. So it will be going to be an interesting scenario where we'll wonder where the clients like yours will definitely are going to knock market research agency door, yes or no, or perhaps maybe just a little validation exercise. You'll come say, instead of going for 1,000 sample size, let us do 100 sample size with the agency, isn't it?
Yeah. Agus or Stagus?
I want to I want to add one small thing. Maybe I think Claudio tell. We work with synthetic data always over real people, and as a researcher, we believe the most important thing is not to avoid everyone outside our company to relate the data with PPI, with personal information. If you can't link the data with the people, we are working on data privacy. That's the most important thing we believe. We have to be all the time very it's very important to nobody could link the data with the people. We build samples, we build study, we want to study or to know the consumer truth, but we don't know, we don't need to know what Ray think about mayonnaise. You can give that information. If you get separate that information, I believe we are doing well in that data privacy.
Great point. Great point. Any other parting words? You know, I think sometimes I can also envision 5 years from now, I will be spending way more on travel than I am today, and I will be telling people you got to fly to New York, and LA and London, and sit behind a piece of glass and actually watch real live human beings walk into a room and take notes on paper and create insights, because that's the answer too, right? How, you know, sometimes what's old is new again. But I do more so believe that our world will have a synthetic component, that there will be lots of value in the generative side, and I still believe in-person interactions will always be a key, and that's just my personal opinion.
So on a similar theme, Barry, I would not be surprised if a year from now, going into McDonald's and the burger is made by an AI-powered robot and it would be as good as McDonald's get. And I would not be surprised that in 100 years, to get the best sushi, I would still have to go to Japan and watch an expert make it by hand.
Yep, I totally agree. We can all subsist off of, many of us could at least subsist off of protein drinks and an apple a day. And we love going to restaurants. And you're right. I go to the best sushi place in my town. I don't buy it at the grocery store, right? And I think those,
or the gas station.
There is one gas station that has the best fried chicken, though. It's amazing. Yeah. Best in town. But sushi, no. Anyway, what goes around comes around. Well, we're at time. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate the conversation. And hopefully we'll have an engaging topic the next time we talk. Thanks a lot, everybody. Take care.
Thank you all. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.